Because of the time of year, I figure I should give some considerations or recommendations for your winter operations. These are things that don't necessarily fit into some other area. They're usually just tips and stuff that I and other people used to teach new troops before winter would begin, when we're doing that winter survival training. First off, and this is an extremely important one, use Canteens and not Camelbacks. Your Camelback is just a big bladder. It's just a bag with water in it. Your water's going to freeze. It can burst that bag pretty easily. A Canteen is a bit tougher. It will swell as it freezes, but typically it will not burst. Now with your Canteens, only fill them to about 3/4 full. Do not fill them all the way, because you have to allow room for that expansion. I have done it when I was a newer soldier, where I would fill it to 80% or 90%, more than that 3/4. And as the water froze, it literally worked its way up into the neck of the canteen, and it would freeze the cap on there. And I wouldn't find that out until I warmed it up a little bit and then was able to remove the cap. And then I found that, the ice had gone up a lot inside the canteen, a lot. I knew I had given myself a couple inches or an inch of space in there below the neck of the canteen, but the ice had risen up to the point that it had risen up right to the cap. So use Canteens, not Camelbacks, in winter. Do not fill them more than 75%. There are Arctic Canteens on the market, military Arctic Canteens. They're harder to get a hold of and they cost a lot more. If you can afford to get a hold of some, why not? Get a hold of it. They are metal, so that way you can heat them up to defrost the water inside. People have asked me, what do you do with your canteen if it freezes and you want a drink of water? Put it inside your jacket, on the inside of your jacket. If you look on your inside your field jackets, inside your Gore-Tex jackets, you usually have that little drawstring that's about where your waist is. Tie that off. Take that canteen, put it between your uniform and the jacket, and then your body heat will start to defrost the water that's inside the canteen. I would not do that to more than one canteen at a time, because it is drawing heat away from your body. You don't want to put too many canteens in there and you end up freezing yourself. I know some people will say that, well, you can just take your Camelback and put it underneath your jacket and keep it from freezing then. And that way you can continue to use your Camelback. Well, you're still going to have the drink tube on it that can freeze pretty quickly. And on top of that, if your Camelback starts to leak, it's going to get your clothing wet, which can cause huge problems with frostbite. Camelbacks are good for hot conditions, not so good during winter conditions. During winter, use Canteens. Next thing, stoves and fuel. When you sleep at night, you're going to want to sleep in some type of shelter. Ideally, a shelter that you can close up enough that you can retain heat. When you start getting close to 0 degrees, and definitely below 0, you're going to want to have a heat source inside there. Having an actual open flame, an open fire inside there probably isn't the safest of options, but if it's all you can do, it's all you can do. Try to get a hold of some stoves. Have them stockpiled, cached in the field. For fuel, ideally, use what's around you. You want to use wood and other dry materials. Now, if you're in an area that it stays very wet over winter, it gets cold, it gets wet, but it doesn't really freeze, you're going to want to cache some dry wood also. And make sure that it stays dry so that when you get into those bad conditions during winter, you can still go grab some of that fuel, get it over to the stove, and keep that stove going through the night. Now, one thing I have done with wood in wintertime, if it's been frozen, if it got wet, I would set it right nearby the stove to dry it out, to defrost it and then dry it. Another thing you should have on hand or be ready for is hot drinks. Make sure to have a good supply of coffee, a good supply of tea, of cocoa, soup packets. Have that stuff available. Make sure to get it out to your people that are on guard duty, especially if they're going to be out there more than an hour. If they're out there for less than an hour, as long as it's not below zero, they might be okay. They can wait till their shift is done, and then they come back to the sleep area, and as soon as they get in the sleep area, you give them something warm to drink to warm them up. If they're out on guard duty and it's below zero, you're going to want to make sure to get them at least one hot drink while they're on guard duty. Have them drink it up as soon as they can, get that warm liquid inside them to keep them warm. And then you move on to the next guard. That's why you should have some thermos bottles, coffee thermoses with your unit for use during winter time. Personal hygiene. You still want to do that during winter. Now, one thing that I was taught at my initial cold weather survival class, personal hygiene, you do it the night before. You do it before you go to bed. You don't do it when you get up in the morning. Because as you're sleeping during the night, you want your body to replace the body oils, the skin oils that were removed when you cleaned yourself. So you shave the night before. You wipe yourself down with baby wipes the night before. Wipe down using some water that's heated up on the stove and a washcloth before you climb into your sleeping bag, or while you're inside the sleeping bag. I've known people that have done that. They've crawled into the sleeping bag, they've stayed, like waist up out of the sleeping bag, and then they used the wipes and that stuff, wipe themselves down, clean themselves underneath their t-shirt and that stuff, gave themselves a couple seconds to dry out in the cool air, and then pulled the t-shirt back down and that stuff before they climbed into completely into the sleeping bag for the night. One thing you really got to watch for is your tracks. During the summer months, it's not as much of an issue. You can move spread out pretty easily, but during winter, the more spread out you are, the easier it is to figure out the size of your unit, the size of your element. Something that people used to get after me about is during winter time, I would close my troops into a column formation, where normally we would be spread out on a wedge. When we're moving through snow, through the woods, I would move them together into a column. By doing it that way, it's a lot harder to figure out how many people are in your element. Now, your first couple people that are in the column, they're going to be your trail breakers. They're going to have a tougher time moving through. You're going to want to rotate them out every so often. But they're cutting the path for everyone that's behind them. Now, the people at the back of your column, they should be trying to cover up the tracks as best as possible. Take some pine boughs and that stuff. They're, sweeping across the top and that stuff, acting like they're sweeping the tracks up in dirt while they're moving the snow around, trying to fill it in as best as possible. It ain't going to be perfect. You're not going to get it completely, but try to fill it in as best you can. Next area, weapons. Keep up on your weapons maintenance. Keep your weapons clean. Just like you clean yourself, your personal hygiene before you go down for the night, clean your weapons before you go down for the night. And during winter months, do not leave a magazine in your weapon. Do not leave a round in the chamber when you go to sleep at night. If you have to, you could leave a magazine in there, but be advised, it might freeze. Definitely do not leave a round in a chamber, because that round can freeze inside the chamber. You fire it, the weapon tries to extract it. It can't get the round out, the casing out, because it's swelled inside that frozen chamber, and it's going to jam your weapon. Worst case scenario, it rips the head off the cartridge casing, and it leaves the majority of the casing still inside the chamber, so then your next round will not feed properly and you will not be able to fire. Do not leave your weapons overnight with round in a chamber unless you're on guard duty. And when you're on guard duty, you know, make sure to cycle your weapon a few times before you chamber that round, so that you knock up any ice, any frost that may have formed inside the weapon. Once you're done with guard duty, drop your magazine, clear the round out of the chamber, put that round back inside the magazine, put it in your pouch, or put the magazine back in your weapon, depending how you store it. And as I said with the sleeping bag video, the modular sleep system video, you can put your weapon underneath the edge of your sleeping bag, not directly underneath you, so that way it's somewhat protected. It keeps it a little bit warm, but not to the point where frost is going to form as soon as you pull it out and you use it outdoors. Outside the tent, outside the shelter. These are some general considerations for winter operations. Are there others? Yes, there are. But these are just the ones I could think of here real quickly to put in here. If anyone ever served in a cold weather environment, you served in Alaska, you served Fort Drum, wherever, you know, if there's things that you, tips that you would recommend, put them in the comments. If I get enough additional tips, maybe I'll do a part 2 to this. Now for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.